Welcome to Vernacular Verbose, Jethro Tull podcast, our Christmas episode where we're going to be taking a look at the Jethro Tull Christmas album released in 2003. My name's Joey Vetter.
My name's Eugene Manko.
If you're a fan of the podcast and are feeling generous, you can donate to us on Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/vernacularverbose. Any contributions will go right back into the production of the podcast by helping us cover our editing costs. Again, that's ko-fi.com/vernacularverbose. Also, before we start, I want to mention that we're soliciting listener feedback for kind of a future mailbag episode. That's an idea that we have that we're doing, where we would kind of take a look at any questions that you guys have, any specific discussion topics that we've never talked about on the podcast before that you'd be interested in hearing us talk about, as well as some other things. You can find that on all of our social media, so on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that. You may have to scroll down a little bit to find the link, but there's a Google form up there where you can submit some stuff to us for us to look at for a future episode. And we also have some optional survey questions on there about things that you guys may be interested in, kind of ideas for the future of the podcast after we're finished with the albums, things like that. So if you're interested, please take a look at our social media to find that Google form and let us know what you think. So for our Christmas episode today, before we start talking about the album itself, just in the spirit of Christmas, I'd like Eugene, you and I grew up in sort of relatively different cultures in different parts of the world.
Oh, yes.
So
very much so.
I'm curious to hear about, what was Christmas like for you growing up and what is Christmas like for you now?
Well, yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone. Generally, Christmas growing up for me was non-existent because, as some of you probably know, in the Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, the Orthodox Christmas is mostly celebrated, and the Orthodox Christmas falls on January 6 and 7. The Christmas Eve is January the 6th, because it's the old calendar. And it was very much just a religious holiday. And the main holiday was the New Year, and still is. The New Year's Eve is the main celebration that's happening around these places. However, these days, we here in Ukraine have two bank holidays. Christmas on the 25th of December and Christmas on the 6th of January. Because we're accommodating both the Catholic and the Orthodox communities. I say Catholic because that's the main community in Ukraine that celebrates Christmas on the 25th of December. There's not many Protestant communities here. And while there's of course a lot of Christmas decor, Christmas music, and all of that spilling into the new year, it still doesn't really feel like a religious holiday. Well, I'm sure it doesn't really feel like a religious holiday around the world anymore. But kind of what I'm saying is this is all a big period of winter festivities with the new year at the top and the two Christmases around the sides. Most of the time, the presents that people normally give to each other on Christmas in the western part of the world, like Boxing Day and all that, that happens on the new year here. And I didn't really pay much attention to the Orthodox Christmas. We didn't really celebrate it in our house, or did it in a very minor way, just as an acknowledgement. But the new year, that was a big deal. Kind of that the new year was when I as a kid was allowed to stay well past my bedtime. You know what I mean? Just go to sleep whenever I want. That was magic. And that's still the time of the year when we convene with friends and sit through the night, play games, listen to music, drink stuff, and generally have a good time.
So forgive my ignorance. So in Ukraine, is there no opening presents in the morning around the tree?
No, I will say in some families that happens on January the 1st.
Okay.
And we did have that when I was a kid. But these days we don't really, because we meet with relatives, personally, me and my wife, we meet with our relatives on the New Year's Eve. We just exchange presents on that day, and we may put them under the Christmas tree, as it were, to be discovered immediately. But yeah, the sort of magic ritual of discovering a present in the morning, around sort of our circle, that's largely gone. I think some of the people who have kids, they will probably do that.
So what about Santa? Is Santa not a thing in Ukraine?
No, Santa is very much a thing. There's lots of Santas strolling around the streets. Santa has largely, well, back in the days of the Soviet Union, there was no Santa, but there was Father Frost.
Yeah, just communist Santa.
Who was a very similar figure, but dressed a little bit different. Most of the time wearing blue rather than red, accompanied by a girl, and well, a less jolly and sort of a little bit more imposing figure. Mm-hmm. That character would never let anyone sit in their lap. You know what I mean? And these days it just kind of amalgamated into one character who is both things at the same time. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure. Well, when I was a kid, there was sort of a thing when one of my parents would dress up as Grandfather Frost and kind of pretend to be them and come in at night and so on. I was a little bit scared of that. But yeah, I don't really know how the kids today think about this character, but there's a lot of them. Grandfather Frost, especially in Russian, sounds extremely hilarious for an English speaker because the name is Ded Moroz, which is like it's Dad and Moroz at the same time. But no, he wasn't Moroz at all.
So do they believe in the whole myth of Santa bringing the presents and stuff?
Yeah, of course, okay. Of course. My earliest memories, I kind of sussed it. That guy was my mom.
Yeah.
So I don't really remember myself believing into Grandfather Frost. Mm-hmm. And what about you?
I think I had, just a pretty average American Christmas upbringing, mm-hmm. where the kind of tradition that we did was my grandparents, when I grew up, they lived on the same street as me. And so I went over there several times a week usually. And our kind of tradition was that we would all eat together at my grandparents' house on Christmas Eve and then open some presents there. And then the next morning, me and my parents would open presents at our house, and then we'd go over to our grandparents again and have Christmas Day dinner. Mm. But, I like every other kid, it was a magical thing for me. The main thing that I remember is like TV specials, like The Grinch Who Stole Christmas and that kind of thing, I think. I don't really know if that's like a thing anymore, if Christmas TV specials, because kids today have streaming where, I guess in theory it's better because they have like a wider selection available at their fingertips. They can watch whatever they want, whenever they want. But I feel like it kind of takes some of the curiosity out of it, because for us it was like, we just watched what was on the cartoon channels, and mm-hmm. Christmas was like the one time of the year where suddenly everything was different. Like it was all Christmas specials that you would never see any other time of the year. And I feel like that's kind of gone now, if you can just watch Christmas stuff like any day you want at the snap of your fingers.
Yeah, I know what you mean. However, there's still, you don't really want Christmas content.
Sure.
Other than during that period. And even though it's streaming, I find myself very much looking forward to, when it's available, the Doctor Who Christmas special. And saving that to watch somewhere around the winter festivities when I'll be taking a vacation and just watching that.
But I left cookies out for Santa. Uh-huh. My dad would go outside and he would throw rocks on the roof of my bedroom to make it sound like there's reindeer on the ceiling or on the roof and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's sweet.
And in retrospect, I don't know how ethical it is to make kids believe in this totally non-existent thing, but whatever its tradition.
Oh, it makes the world, a more wonderful place. Wonderful as in full of wonder. If you, I know you're not a massive Terry Pratchett fan like I am, but if you ever get the chance to see Hogfather, the TV movie based on Terry Pratchett's book Hogfather, it's a Christmas movie basically, and there's a lot in it about belief and how belief shapes the world. So I think that part is part of the Christmas magic. Everyone pretending at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I can identify with your story about recognizing the person who was playing Santa or whatever. Because I grew up in a church setting, and I went to like nursery and things like that in a local church. And I remember one time they would always have mascots come through for holidays and stuff. And they had, they would bring the Easter Bunny on Easter, which completely terrified me for many, many years. But they would also bring Santa, which was obviously always a huge deal, like to be able to meet a larger than life figure like Santa. And there was one guy in this church who, I'll just say, he fits the profile of Santa very easily. And so he had a very distinctive voice also. And so, you would go in to meet Santa, and as soon as he started talking, you just thought like, oh, this is that guy. Like, this isn't Santa. And, amazingly, we still weren't able to figure out even back then that was kind of the card being pulled from the deck. But still, that's kind of a similar thing. But I have to say today that Christmas kind of bugs me today. It's, to me, Christmas to me today just means like cold weather and Christmas music every single place you go. And especially living in Japan, the Japanese go hard for Christmas. They love Christmas. It's crazy. But obviously it's kind of a weird thing because obviously here it's a completely cultural observance. It's not a holiday. It's not a public holiday. There's no real, religious meaning behind it. And in the U.S. and the West, that's happening too. Christmas is mostly a secular holiday now. But still, in Japan, like there's really no, religious, meaning or ideology behind it. And their idea of what Christmas is in other countries is quite warped here, which is kind of funny. So, for example, it's actually custom on Christmas Day to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken in Japan, which was unbelievable to me. It's hilarious to every American, but like the reason they do that is because they really think that's what people do in other countries on Christmas. I go to my barber and I tell them I'm going home to America for Christmas, and they say, "Oh, are you going to eat KFC with your family?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to do that." But that's, if I can leave my apartment right now and I can go down the block to KFC, and I guarantee you right now there's people putting in their reservations for a bucket of KFC on Christmas. It's so strange.
Fantastic. Is that what the kind of the turkey dinner morphed into in people's minds?
I don't know, because I don't know where it came from, but the thing that's weird from an American perspective is, of course, we're used to Thanksgiving coming in between Halloween and Christmas. But of course, there's no Thanksgiving anywhere else. So in Japan, like as soon as it's November 1st, like there's Christmas everywhere. Like all the lights are up, all the music is up. So it's a huge deal, and it's like a couple's day in Christmas. It's not really like a family day for Japan. But yeah, the only holiday of the year I like is Halloween. That's the only one that I get excited for. Christmas is kind of old hat for me.
Yeah, especially because you don't have Halloween music blasting around since August.
Yeah, although, I'm telling you, every year it's going further and further back. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but also, what is Halloween music? You don't really get, traditional. What would people play? Bauhaus?
Yeah, you can find all the Halloween playlists online, but I think most shopping malls aren't going to play them.
Yeah, exactly. While with Christmas, it's,
And so, of course, somebody else who was celebrating Christmas, at least in 2003, was Jethro Tull.
Yes, and speaking of Christmas music.
So, I'm going to be honest, this was not an album that I really wanted to talk about, but we have to do it because, of course, believe it or not, this is officially a Jethro Tull studio album. This is the 21st Tull album. So we felt like it made sense to, pick this one out. out of the timeline and kind of do it now for a Christmas episode out of order.
Yeah, I must say, when I began listening to it this week, which is a month ahead yet of Christmas at time of recording, I first felt a little bit annoyed, just because it kind of felt like a shopping mall beginning to play Christmas music on the 1st of November.
Yeah.
But it sort of grew on me over this week. I personally don't think of it as a proper sort of Jethro Tull studio album. To me, it's more novelty still. But there's a lot of good things to be said about it, nevertheless.
I will say that I found this a bit more interesting than I was expecting it to be. But in general, I mean, I think you and I probably agree on this. The idea of a Christmas album, especially for a band like this, is pretty off-putting to me. Just because I feel like when you're at the point where you're selling Christmas albums, it's way past your time to pasture. The way that I view it. Because, I mean, the reason that these albums are made, it's not really for music's sake, right? I mean, it's it's to move units in a particular season of the year, which to me is doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth.
That's true, but at the same time, they made a pretty good effort. And unlike some other bands, there were songs from Jethro Tull catalog that fit seamlessly into the concept of the Christmas album.
I know there was something I read that Ian said, I don't remember where this was, but he said that when he first kind of received the idea of doing an album, which the idea came from the label, which I think is not surprising. He initially was he immediately said no instinctually, but then he kind of thought about it and he thought that, there was a way that he could do it that made sense. So, I mean, at least in that regard, I mean, Ian wasn't going to do it unless he felt like there was a reason to do it. So,
yeah. And unless he felt like he could do something unique, which they actually did. When you listen to it, without paying much attention, it could serve as perfectly nice background music. But if you pay attention to what they're doing and kind of examine what they're doing with the material, it's actually pretty interesting to think about, because there's not one single approach on the entire album, even though the album sounds very cohesive, because obviously it was all recorded at the same time by mostly the same band, which is an interesting point regarding the musicians on this album, I think.
Yeah, when it comes to the people who played on this album, this was something that was really surprising to me when I actually looked at the liner notes for a couple of reasons. So, we're kind of jumping ahead in time here. The last album we put out was Crest of a Knave, so we're jumping ahead, some 15 years or so.
Yeah, we're putting this one out of order because we want it to be the Christmas episode, if anyone is wondering.
So the lineup at this time was Ian Anderson on vocals, flute, acoustic guitar, Martin Barn electric guitar, Jonathan Noyce on bass guitar, Andrew Giddings on keyboards, and Doane Perry on drums. So that was Jethro Tull at this time. But what's interesting about this album, James Duncan, who is Ian Anderson's son, plays drums on about half of the album, about 7 tracks.
Yeah.
Dave Pegg actually comes back and plays bass on 2 tracks, and I think mandolin on another track. And this was the single biggest surprise to me. Andrew Giddings plays bass on 7 tracks. Like, basically half of the album is Andrew Giddings playing bass, which I had no clue about that.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
And I read the liner notes for this album, and Ian mentions that he was working on a solo album at this time, which I guess was Rupee's Dance, I guess. And because of that, a lot of this album was kind of recorded separately, like in separate studios with, like just Andrew Giddings in his studio with Martin and then somebody else somewhere else. So it was kind of like, geographically, it was kind of like a hodgepodge to put it all together.
Yeah, but it's all mixed pretty well, considering the way it was done. I think the mixing and the recording on this album is outstanding.
The Tull website also says about this album that it was, quote, an unexpected critical and commercial success, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, because when you're doing a Christmas album, you will be expecting some kind of backlash, some kind of criticism. That's another bunch of old guys trying to cash in.
Yeah. Well, I'll mention, so you talked about how you could view some of this album as background music, and I'm not going to say I view the entire album as that, but there are quite a few tracks on here that, to me, they just kind of come across as easy listening Christmas.
I mean, it's mixed in such a way that the entire album, I think, could well be played in a supermarket
Yeah.
around Christmas time, and I wouldn't mind that one bit. Because I think of all the Christmas albums I've heard, this is the best Christmas album in existence, which may not be a very high bar.
Yeah.
But still, you know, if I have to choose something that's thematically Christmassy and play that to a gathering of people for whatever reason, this will be one of my first choices. I actually did that. There was a Christmas celebration I was part in several years ago, and on my playlist there was the Jethro Tull Christmas album, there was the Jethro Tull string quartets, which I think work in much the same way, and some other stuff as well. But yeah, I wouldn't mind many of public places swapping their Christmas playlists for this.
Do you feel anything about the front cover?
No. I think it's pretty uninspiring as front covers go.
I actually quite like the image a lot, but I'd have one problem with it, which I think is pretty obvious, which is the little Ian in the corner, which I think just looks ridiculous.
Yeah, it's very obviously a cutout from it's the same image used on the cover for Rupees Dance.
Yeah.
And I think it made sense to them to kind of connect the two albums in a way, because they do sound a little bit similar, especially in the way they are recorded, maybe not in terms of content. But they are sort of very much companion albums. And in this case, because Rupees Dance is an original work, start to finish, the Jethro Tull Christmas album feels like the companion to it, rather than the other way around.
The little Ian, it makes me think of, I don't know if any of our listeners will know what I'm talking about here, but so when Drake put out his album Views a couple of years ago, he did kind of a similar thing on the album cover, where the broader album cover was this beautiful shot of the tower in Toronto. I think that's the CN Tower, I think. This very moody shot of the tower close up with like storm clouds behind it. But then at the very top of the tower, there was this tiny little cutout of Drake sitting on top of the tower, like this little mini Drake sitting on the tower. And it just ruined the whole image for me. It just looks so ridiculous and funny. And to me, it's like the same thing here. To me, this painting or whatever it is beautiful. And I think it actually fits Tull really well. Because, you know, there's things about Tull that can work really well in this context. And I don't even mean just musically. I mean just like the visuals and the atmosphere that Jethro Tull brings up as musicians. I think you can craft kind of like a wintry medieval type feeling, even like a home type feeling, you know, which I think is exactly what this cover does. But the little Ian is too much.
Yeah, I don't think the painting is bad. It's a nice image, but I just don't feel it's special enough to be a cover. There's an element of, it lacks an element of some extra element of design, some extra idea, some extra story in it. Because this way is just picture that you could find hanging somewhere, just an element of decor rather than part of the story, which kind of colors the experience of listening to this album as background music. The cover art for it is very much a background picture.
Yeah, the back cover is pretty terrible. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's just kind of like a reef background that it looks like you could find off Google, with like a kind of a poor photo of the band like pasted above it with the track listing.
I think I saw it because I should have a CD somewhere, or I think my dad has that CD, but I don't really recall it. The cover pictures I have currently are from the issue of this album paired with Christmas at St. Bride's, the live performance from 2008, and the back cover is different, and it's not very good either.
Track 1, Birthday Card at Christmas.
Got a birthday card at Christmas. It made me think of Jesus Christ. It said I love you.
So this is one of the few new compositions on the disc, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
This was written about Ian's daughter, which he mentioned somewhere, because his daughter was born close to Christmas, which is, you know, kind of a sucky situation for any kid to be in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what inspired this. I have to say, you know, I actually think this song is not that bad. I think In general, it kind of actually does feel like old Tull, whatever you consider old Tull. I think the part that makes me a little iffy about it is just that it's a really bright song, if you know what I mean. And almost to the point where it almost kind of sounds like I'm listening to like contemporary radio or something. It's kind of the feeling that it gives me.
I feel like a lot of this album was mixed thinking of radio.
Yeah.
Because if we compare the recordings on this album of the songs that have been quote-unquote updated, we'll find that they're much brighter with much clearer vocals, and I think it was made thinking of radio play, thinking of the possibility of this being played in a public space.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it ever was. I like this song. I don't have really much analysis to throw at it, but listening to this back-to-back with like Rupee's Dance, it feels a little bit similar to Ian's solo work from the same period, which is completely unsurprising. But I feel like it would have sounded a little bit more like Jethro Tull if it weren't for the strummy acoustic guitar in the center of the mix. That one kind of takes something away from me.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's kind of where some of my comments come about like contemporary radio, because it very much does sound like a very like pop rock type guitar part, I think.
Yeah, because you will add acoustic guitar to basically any song where you would like to have more brightness, more definition, more rhythmic definition, but you would normally mix that down to the point of being barely audible but still contributing that little percussive element, little high end. Well, here it's very clear that they wanted it to still be audible, and I don't know how I feel about that one.
The only other musical thing I have to add is just the drum part for this is actually kind of cool. This is Doan Perry, I believe, on this one. And there's a lot of fast 16th rhythms, which I think are not super common in a lot of Tull stuff. So, I've mentioned before that because of when Doan came into the band and just the popularity of the band at the time, I feel like he didn't really get a chance to kind of leave a big imprint on kind of the legacy of Tull drumming. So it's kind of cool for me. So by the way, this is the first time I've ever listened to this entire album from front to back. So it was kind of a new experience for me. So to be able to actually hear some like original, Doan parts was kind of interesting for me.
It's a high energy track, as Tull will do on many albums. We've already noticed that. And rhythmically, again, I'm comparing this to Rupee's Dance. If we listen to Caliandra Shade, which is the opening track on Rupee's Dance, there is kind of a similarity in the delivery, and that's it's a high energy track driven by an acoustic guitar with a fast rhythm behind it, and I think that's exploring a similar idea, but it's very different. I'm not saying these two songs are similar at all. They just serve the same purpose on the record.
One thing I will say too, not just for this song but this whole album, most of this album at least, so for whatever the vocal issue with Ian, which I really don't have a lot to add on that. I know that's kind of maybe one of the holy trinity topics to make any Tull fan fly into a flaming rage and argue with strangers for hours on the internet over. I don't really have a lot to add to that, but I will say that at least on this album at this time, he was still doing pretty well, I think, on a lot of these tracks. I think there, he isn't batting 100%. There's one track in particular where the vocals are not very good, I think, but I mean, for now, I think he was still doing pretty well.
Yeah, and where he felt that he wasn't able to perform as well, and there's at least one track where they changed the key to a lower one.
Yeah.
Thematically, I think this album opener speaks a lot of their intention on this album. They don't want it to be a straightforward Christmas record just based on standard Christmas music. So this is already veering a little bit to the side of what we traditionally think of as Christmas music, because speaking of something else attached to Christmas, like someone having a birthday on the same day, and how it connects with the Christmas story, but at the same time how it is an experience a lot of kids have who will be born on around the Christmas day. So it is an immediate statement that this Christmas album is not like the others. We're not going to be just rehashing Jingle Bells and we wish you a Merry Christmas. We're going to say something. We're going to say something new.
Yeah, and I think the fact that like there are new compositions, period, on this album is kind of a way of making that statement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's worth noting too, just like Ian's relationship with the Christian church, because he's not somebody who considers himself a practicing Christian, but he's someone who has had a long relationship with the Christian church in terms of doing annual Christmas concerts for a charity and that kind of thing. And I think he's always spoken about maybe this was not what the Ian Anderson of 1971 would say, but the Ian Anderson, at least of the past couple of decades, I think has been clear that he's quite positive towards the actions of the Christian church, at least in terms of beneficiary and things like that, and has always been supportive of that aspect of Christianity, even if he's not a practicing believer of it. And I think that's probably a lot of what he was interested in putting forth on this album. And I think he's clearly interested in Christian culture and things like that, which probably influenced some of the selections of traditional stuff on this album.
Yeah, it's been very obvious up to that point already that his views on religion had changed.
Yeah.
Because in 1995 he's put out Divinities, which is an ecumenical album, which is looks at different religions and the point, at least philosophically, because there's no lyrics on that album, but in terms of concept, it's a look at different religions and the point where they converge. And so it's completely unsurprising that he's doing that. I wonder if on any of his Christmas gigs he performed My God. I'm not sure if he did.
I doubt it.
And yeah, that's a different view, and I'm sure that at least a lot of English vicars will agree with the sentiment on My God, because the Anglican Church these days is not fundamentalist in the slightest.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe with Brexit and things like that, there's more fundamentalism raising its head. But I'm not sure about that. Track 2, Holy Herald. This is an interesting one for me because unlike the other Christmas tunes that make their appearance on this album, I'm mostly unfamiliar with the two originals that they used in this one, the Holly and the Ivy, and even Hark the Herald Angels Sing. I may have heard that one, but I didn't really register it.
Really?
Because both of these tunes, I listened to the originals a few times, and both of these tunes strike me as not very memorable as Christmas carols go. I'm not sure they count as carols, but Christmas songs. However, they made them into something more recognizable, into something that has more personality to it, I feel, which is, I think, a good result. This song has what I will call during this episode a late Tull flute solo, where everything kind of goes a little darker and the flute veers off in a slightly Eastern-tinged improvisation.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
And other than that, contextually, there's also, this track makes sense because it precedes a Christmas song, the next track, and the Christmas song begins with a quote from Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Yeah. And them making this into a complete musical piece and putting that in that order, I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
this one isn't bad for me. It's a Christmas melody, which typically I would think is kind of lame, but I think the way that they pulled this off, it's very light and bouncy, is kind of the way that I would describe this song. And part of that is kind of driven by the drum part, which is equally very light and bouncy and kind of cool. It's interesting that you're not that familiar with Hark the Herald Angels Sing, because that's a huge song in America.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Because Christmas is not very religious around here.
Yeah.
And the religious part of Christmas doesn't really spill over into the secular life.
Yeah.
Because of course there's masses in church and people go there and sing songs.
part of my own personal experience with this is that, so every school I've ever been affiliated with in my life has been a Christian school. So when I was a kid, I went to a K through 12 private Christian school, which means that it was like preschool through high school all in the same school. And so during that time of life, you know, every single year I would have to go to Christmas concerts, either because I was playing in them in a band or something, or because you had to sit through it in order to get your freedom in Christmas break and that kind of thing. But so one of the results of that, and plus having to go to chapel every day and that kind of thing, is, you know, hearing lots of, I guess, religious Christmas music. And, you know, Hark the Herald Angels thing was without a doubt, you know, part of that repertoire that you heard all the time.
Yeah, and they turned it into a completely different piece of music within this track, because it's sped up considerably, and it just whizzes by. It's like it's a quote of a melody, but played in an entirely different manner. Because as far as I know, Hark the Herald Angels Sing is a very slow-moving composition.
Yeah. You know, one thing that this track made me think of, so you mentioned previously about you like the mixing on this album. And one of the things, there's a big problem that I have with later Ian/Tull stuff. And I hear it a bit on this album, and this track in particular made me think of it, which kind of made me write the note down.
All right.
I think it's not as bad on this album. It gets a lot worse with like Ian's later stuff, but I kind of hear it too, which is just that the production is so dry and sterile and quiet, especially if you listen to like Homo Eroticus and Thick as a Brick too. It's really, really aggravating, just, you know, how incredibly dry the production on those albums are. And I'm not saying that like this album is that bad, but I can hear it on some of the tracks on here kind of starting as well.
I know what you mean. And compared to this album, Thick as a Brick 2 and Homo Eroticus, I feel they are worse in terms of mixing and production.
Yeah, for sure.
While here, it's dry, but it's not flat. In terms of this particular track, we are starting to see very different approaches that they used on this album. They're not taking the same approach to every piece of material they choose. With every piece of material, they kind of give it a different spin. With this one, this musically is reminiscent of like Irish folk music or Celtic folk music, in a more broad term. And there's not another track here that's done in the same manner. There's a new song which has the same feel, but that's a new one. And a rearrangement of an existing piece of Christmas music in this particular style is unique to Holy Herald, which is, I think it's pretty fun when you start noticing that, how they're taking different approaches and different spins to different tracks.
I like the accordion and the bells show up on here, which is not uncommon for the rest of the album. But
yeah, I keep wondering how much Andrew Giddings really hated playing the accordion, aka the squeezy thing, as Ian pointed out so many times during live performances, because there's loads of accordion on here.
Track 3, A Christmas Song.
Once in royal David City.
So this is the first of the re-recorded Tull songs. So this, of course, was the B-side to Love Story, if I remember right. Kind of a, post This Was era song.
Pre-This Was, I think wasn't it?
So Love Story was after This Was. It was it was one of the last things that Mick Abrahams did.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Pre-Stand Up. I'm getting those mixed up.
So I don't really have a lot to add on these re-recordings. I don't. After listening to this album, I don't really understand the point of these re-recordings, because a lot of the time, either barely anything is different, or it's just a worse version. It's kind of the way that they sound to me.
I know what you mean, and I think there's definitely a few songs that I think are worse. There's one song that I think is better, just one. And I feel like a lot of these re-recordings were done thinking about, again, radio play and using this album as a piece of public Christmas material, public Christmas music. Because if we compare these songs to the originals don't really... It will be very difficult to play these beautiful original recordings in the same playlist
Sure, yeah.
as pieces of modern Christmas music. because they are mixed so differently.
Yeah.
And if we listen to like Weathercock back to back from Christmas album and from Heavy Horses, you'd be struck by how the mix differs, how it's a completely different sonic space, and not one that will be like, I don't know, palatable to an average listener who doesn't know about Jethro Tull and who doesn't know these songs.
Yeah.
Within the context of an album, if you took a member of the public who is unfamiliar with Jethro Tull and played the entirety of Heavy Horses to them, they wouldn't think it were so much different because there's context. But if we put Weathercock between Let It Snow and Jingle Bells in a supermarket, the original Weathercock, it would be jarring.
Yeah.
It's not that it's worse, but the mixing on that is so different. The drums are quieter, the vocals are in a different place, and I don't think it would just, well, to us it would be a welcome change.
Yeah.
But
I was gonna say I would argue that even Weathercock in this track listing is kind of jarring, but not for sound reasons. But I'll get to that later.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't have any complaints about a Christmas song on this album. It's just it sounds to me like the original, except with new vocals. Is kind of all that it sounds like to me.
I do have a little complaint. I don't mind that it doesn't have the strings, because it's quite enough for me to have the original version with the beautiful strings. But there's a vocal thing here, which I feel is different and I feel is a little bit worse. Other than the context being different, because the original Christmas song is a very young person singing like they were a grumpy old man, right? And chastising the commercializing of Christmas. Well, here we have a literal grumpy old man chastising the commercializing of Christmas. And even though the phrase tacked on to the end, which first appeared, I think, on Living in the Past, wasn't on the single, Hey Santa, passes that bottle, will you?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Kind of makes light of the entire thing, that it's not to be taken too seriously.
Yeah.
But still, there's a little bit of charm in a young Ian Anderson being all angry and self-righteous about the Christmas spirit disappearing from Christmas. And there's not much of that left in a more mature Ian Anderson expressing the same sentiment.
Yeah.
But other than the kind of the theatrical part, the conceptual part, there's something about the young Ian's vocal delivery that keeps you listening, that keeps you focused on his voice from line to line, where it doesn't feel like the line drops when he stops singing. It feels like he keeps singing. The entire song, the entire verse is one continuous line, even though it has large gaps in the middle. That's one of the things that Ian used to do so well, keeping you listening, keeping those little micro intonation hooks in his vocal performance that told you that the melody was not finished. And I feel like that's a little bit missing from the updated version of Christmas Song.
Yeah.
Like every line gets dropped just a little bit. It just, whenever he stops singing, that's kind of the end.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You're not hypnotized by that delivery as much as you are on the original Christmas Song, which is not by far not one of my favorite Tull tracks, but that's the way I feel about the new version.
So I don't remember, there's not March snare on the original Christmas Song, was there?
There was, I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
There's a few March snares on this album, and I was taking a note of them, but there is.
Okay, yeah, that was something I've noted.
Track 4, another Christmas song.
Hope everybody's ringing on their own bell this fine morning. Hope everyone's connected to that.
It's very funny to put both of them next to each other, because obviously another Christmas song references Christmas Song in its title. A much later track from Rock Island, which we hadn't discussed yet.
Yeah.
This one, I believe, among the re-recorded versions, is one that was made better. Because it's hardly different from the 1989 original, but it's less 80s, and it doesn't have the obnoxious drum reverb on it. Not much is different. The vocals are, I feel, on par, because that's already a late Ian vocals on Rock Island as well. So yeah, it's a very simple song as Tull goes, and another one in the vein of feel-good songs like Fires at Midnight.
The thing that this made me think of is it's very interesting how of the album tracks that were kind of resurrected for this album, it's very interesting how I feel like the style of each of those albums really comes through in those songs, even though they're being recorded, in a more modern context. So I think like there's very much a late 80s Rock Island style to this song, which, it still comes through all the way, even though they're recording it many years later.
It does.
And it's funny you mentioned the reverb on the drums, because I had a note there that, well, let me clarify first that I haven't listened to Rock Island yet, because we still have that to go. So I can't really compare these directly, but it sounded to me like they were almost trying to go for like 80s reverb on the drums on this song, the way that they beefed them up.
Yeah, well, if you compare the two versions, the drums on Rock Island are just outrageous.
Oh boy, I can't wait for that then.
Yeah, so it's much less an 80s production in the updated version, and comparing the two back to back, I do prefer out of these two the version on Christmas album.
The harp sound caught my ear. I wasn't sure if that was a real harp or if it was a keyboard.
I think Andrew Giddings was famous for using lots of samples of acoustic instruments on his keyboards, and that must be his doing.
But I don't know. I mean, I think a term that I used on Crest of a Knave, and that I suspect I'm going to be using a lot more in the next couple of albums, is kind of the old man hotel ballad. And that's kind of what this song sounds like to me.
Well, it literally has old man in the lyrics.
Yeah.
Well, I don't feel this one is much of a hotel ballad, but yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I like the addition of the bells in this. There's a lot of bells, again, I'm sure sampled, lots of bells on the album, and there weren't any on the 1989 original, and I feel it's pretty tasteful even on this song in particular.
Track 5, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. So this is actually kind of has a long history with Tull, because this song, which is a traditional song, was used even as far back as the 70s. I think it originated as part of Ian's flute solo, if I have that correct. So Ian would kind of play some measures of this as part of his sort of flute solo interlude section. And this is kind of the first time they've actually put it to recording as more of a full piece.
Yeah, it made complete sense for them to do this track. And they made it really different. Because one of the interesting things musically about this melody is what they are doing with it. The original melody, the Christmas Carol, is of course straight without any swing to it. It's just straight 4/4, da 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 da. And when Ian was incorporating that into his flute solo, he played that in 6/8. And what they're doing here, they're not using that rhythm. They're slowing it down to half time, but they're keeping the same swing. So the swing is now 16th notes instead of 8th notes. If you listen to a piece of God Rest You Merry Gentlemen from Ian's flute solo and what's happening with the rhythm on this one, you'll see what I mean. But overall, this is kind of the Bourée approach. It's just take a tune and jazz it up, turn it into, like Ian likes to say, cocktail lounge jazz.
Yep, exactly.
I found it very funny when I first heard him introduce that on the orchestral Jethro Tull album, Count Basie Meets Tom and Jerry. But this is another different approach to a Christmas tune that they're using on this album, and there won't be another one like it. This is sort of them pretending to be a jazz band.
Yeah.
They're playing a swing tune, they're using little improvisations, they trade off solos and so on, and they're doing that in what is arguably a jazz context, which it really isn't. It's just a bunch of rock musicians playing a swing tune. I don't think they would call themselves a jazz band when doing that, but it is a jazz approach and it is a swing piece, which makes it sound like jazz.
There were a couple sonic choices on this track which kind of surprised me. Which the very first one was just the marimba, which was really cool. That I wasn't expecting that. And also, so the guitar tone and the organ, I'm not going to remember the exact name of this organ sound, but it's a fairly famous organ sound. And it almost kind of sounds to me like they're going for like a retro 50s, 60s sound. That almost is what it sounds like. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, you could imagine a band from the 50s or 60s playing God Rest You Merry Gentlemen in a jazz way, as it were. But this is one of the most background tunes to me on the album, because the sort of swing jazz delivery makes it to me more standard sonically than probably any other song on the Christmas album.
With the organ, there's even parts where it sounds like the closest thing since John Evans. It really sounds like a thick as a brick style Hammond organ tone in some places.
Yeah, the sounds on this one are great. Overall, I was thinking of what track I would mention this on, because I could mention it on anyone. The Christmas album and Rupee's Dance. I think there was something in 2003 about, I don't know, the choice of microphone or preamp or recording equipment. Maybe not everyone will agree with me, but I feel like that year was the best recorded flute in Tull history. Not the performance. Maybe there were certainly better flute solos over Ian's career. There were certainly more meaningful flute performances. But just in terms of sound and mixing, the way the flute is recorded and the way how it sounds very full and not buried in the mix by maybe on other albums it was a difficult choice when there was more electric guitar, which is tough to kind of marry in terms of frequencies with the flute, and so they have to compromise. But the fullness of the flute sound on this album is really, really pleasing. It's very full. It's full of low end, full of definition, and a really nice performance technically. I'm not saying this is my favorite Tull music. I think that's kind of been clear from the discussion up to this point. I'm just saying that the flute is recorded spectacularly. Track 6, Jack Frost and the Hooded Crow.
Say Jack Frost and the Hooded Crow.
Well, in this one they've unearthed an outtake.
Yeah.
Not a well-known Tull song. I think
a broadsword outtake, right?
Yeah, up to that point, I think it was only released on one of the anniversary albums, 20 years or 25 years, because it was released as a broadsword bonus track later. It hadn't been remixed at the time, remastered, I mean. This one, compared to the original, I think it listens to more smoothly. It has a comparatively kind of better flow. But if compared to the original track, to me it takes away a little bit from it, because the original 80s Jack Frost is such a surprising song with so many surprising sounds and textures and places where you don't know where you are. Stop times and very odd rhythms on top of a 5/4 beat, which is the entire song is in 5/4. This one is more ready for radio play, because you don't really, you notice that it's not in 4/4, but it doesn't distract you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the thing I thought on this one was, again, it was just amazing to me how much the original album's style came through in kind of this more modern take on it. I'm not that familiar with the original version of this song, but it's very clear to me. I mean, I can hear like the arena rock 80s-ness of Broadsword coming through in a lot of this, even if it's, kind of stylistically different.
The arrangement choices on the original are they feel more stark. They feel more epic in a way. Yeah. I'm not sure I dig the Christmas melodies tacked on to the end. I don't think that was necessary.
Some of the flute lines here, I'm assuming these are the flute lines in the original song. They remind me a lot of Weathercock, which is only 2 tracks later in this track listing, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't think they sound as similar to Weathercock on the original versions. Overall, this album makes a lot of the songs sound more similar than they are.
Yeah.
Because it's the same band, largely. doing them at the same time in the same period. So in terms of production, the album is very cohesive, even though, like you say, there's lots of the original style shining through the different tracks.
This is a song that I always hear people talking about online. They kind of bring this up as like a highlight of Tull Christmas songs and that kind of thing.
I can see that, yeah, because it's not as feel good as another Christmas song, and maybe not as bitter as Christmas song. So it has a true, more of a true kind of Christmas sentiment.
Yeah.
Of thinking about less fortunate people.
I like the maracas towards the end, and I like how they kind of get their own space to do their own thing. It kind of makes me think about, I imagine this is not the case in Eastern Europe, but in the US, because Latin culture is so ubiquitous, especially in the South, kind of in Texas where I grew up, the marriage of Christmas culture and then also Latin Christmas culture, so Feliz Navidad and things like that, is also very ubiquitous when it comes to Christmas culture. And also the procession, Las Posadas, the kind of the reenactment of Mary and Joseph searching for a home in Bethlehem and that kind of thing. So I mean, stuff like that was just up there with everything else when I grew up in Texas. So that's kind of a roundabout way of linking the maracas to that memory, which made me think of that side of Christmas.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was the intention. They may have just picked up a piece of percussion.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And sticks it on there. But yeah, I mean, ecumenical is the name of the game.
Track 7, Last Man at the Party.
So make yourselves jolly under mistletoe, holly, and ivy, get to it and be in good cheer. And when it's all over, big scarlet clover.
So this is another new song, if I remember right. I don't have a lot to add on this one, really. It just kind of sounds like typical Tull folk. I think it's fine, but there's nothing about it which I think is particularly interesting. I think they're kind of going for like the tavern rock thing, which is kind of cool. Especially when I was a kid, I associated Tull with like medieval fantasy and stuff, as I've mentioned. So when I was a kid, I loved reading like the Redwall series and video games like World of Warcraft and that kind of thing. And I mean, as ridiculous as it may sound for kind of older people, like I associated Tull with those kinds of worlds very closely, because to me they were like a medieval rock band and that kind of thing. So I kind of admire this like tavern pub style folk, which to me is kind of emblematic of what a Tull take on the winter season and hearth fire and that kind of thing is kind of emblematic of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Oddly enough, the album I associate with the most with video games from Tull is .com.
Yeah, I can see that.
This one, this one has a very similar vibe to Holy Herald. Both of these tracks are sort of Celtic/medieval rhythmic feel. Last Man slightly more medieval than Celtic. It also reminds me a little bit of Fat Man. It has a similar mandolin-driven fast vocal, well, moderate sort of fast vocal delivery. Well, I'm saying fast. It's not fast. It's just focused on the vocal rhythm. I think that's what it is. Other than that, it's another grumpy old man song, I feel. Don't bother me with your festivities. Leave me alone.
The one part I like about it the most is actually the outro, where the guitar loop is kind of repeating over and over, and it's kind of hypnotizing and cool sounding. That was kind of the only part about it that really stuck out to me.
There's a couple of really nice outros on this album, I feel.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but other than it being one of the new songs on the album, I don't really feel it as a highlight.
Yeah, it's pretty unremarkable for me.
Track 8, Weathercock.
Sing to us softly, hum evening song. Tell us what the blacksmith
Again, re-recording a past song fitting to the theme overall, and I think we said it about this song when we were talking about Heavy Horses. This song has a home theme. It makes you think of a house, and I think that's how it fits into the album concept. But you said it was a little bit jarring in here.
Yeah, this was a surprising choice to me for a Christmas album. And so, I mean, the immediate first thought I had was, I think I mentioned on the Heavy Horses episode that this song is kind of linked to Fire at Midnight to me. To me, it's kind of like a separate take on a similar concept as Fire at Midnight. But Fire at Midnight to me is a song that fits with the idea of Christmas a lot more. And I actually, when I heard this, I looked forward in the track list and thought, oh, okay, so Fire at Midnight is here too. But, Weathercock to me is kind of different, because it's true that it's about a home, and it's about a home in winter, which I guess is kind of where the connection comes from. But to me, Fire at Midnight is about like the coziness and the hearth fire of a home and the comfort of a home. To me, Weathercock is kind of different. Weathercock is about the different edges of a home. You have the weathercock at the top, which is frozen and is having trouble moving because it's so cold outside. Or you have the roof, which needs repairs because the winter has kind of damaged it and that kind of thing. That's kind of what Weathercock makes me think about. So it was kind of surprising to me to see this pick as a Christmas song.
Yeah, but maybe again, it's trying to break out of the mold of a traditional Christmas theme. It's incorporating all those things that are part of Christmas, because you need a roof, right?
Yeah.
Over your head to celebrate Christmas, and if there's something wrong with it, it's part of your life as well. So I don't mind Weathercock appearing here. I think it's not like they inserted Aqualung, which also has a wintry theme, but it's a very different one. That would have been jarring, probably.
Musically, so I mean, this is the first song on here that I'm actually sort of familiar with already, except for the references to older Christian songs or Christmas songs. It's kind of impressive how much the music sounds like the original here, but that also, again, that kind of makes you wonder, like, what is the point of doing these songs the exact same way again? It kind of makes me think of, so like right now Taylor Swift is doing her whole thing where like she's re-recording entire albums exactly as they were. For her, she's doing that for legal reasons. She's doing it to try to get royalties back and that kind of thing, which that makes sense. But for these, I get that they're mixing them different, and I get that, they're trying to update these for a more modern audience. But when I hear how similar the music, not the vocals, but the music sounds to the original, it just makes me wonder, like, it kind of gives you the same feeling as like all the remakes that they're doing in Hollywood now, where they just take the same movie but they do it in live action or something.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but at the same time, is there much to be improved upon on Weathercock? There isn't, and they're acknowledging that and doing it in much the same way they would have played it live.
Yeah,
right. Because if they had to perform it in a live set, which I'm not sure they were doing at the time. Not sure this song was a popular choice in Tull live sets. But that's the way they would do that. And I feel it's pretty opposite. I'm not saying it's a better track. It's not better on the Christmas album. It's just it hasn't been made considerably worse.
Yeah, well, I agree with that.
And I feel like the acoustic guitar arrangement at the end, which is different from the original track, it's nice and it makes sense in there.
Yeah, those were the only things I noticed, was the guitar violin part at the end, and then just bells throughout.
Yeah, of course there's bells. You need to have bells. It's the Christmas album.
Track 9, Pavane. So the funny thing on this one, as soon as this started, my ears immediately thought it was On Further On from A. I was thinking, what the hell is going on?
Oh, really?
I don't know. I'll start off by just saying the guitar on this is quite nice. It reminds me a lot of like Martin's kind of acoustic solo stuff.
Yeah.
From kind of around the same period. But I don't know. This is sort of getting into like easy listening, fall asleep territory for me. But what do you think?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm sure the acoustic guitar is coming from Martin's solo albums. It's what he was interested in doing at the time. Pretty obvious, I think. I think it's not a bad track. It does get into the easy listening territory. Completely agree with that. But again, I went to Bourèe's Pavane and listened to that. And even not counting the sort of darker part in the middle where they have this roots to branches era Phrygian dominant Eastern thing kind of happening. The original piece is based on a Spanish court dance. It's been written by Gabriel Fauré in late 19th century. So it is not a court dance in its own, because the court dances were several centuries ago by that time. But it's very impersonal, the Fauré's piece, because the idea of the Pavane as a dance is it's a processional dance, and it's used to open grand ceremonies and to display attire. People would parade in front of the king and queen in their best clothes and salute them, all kind of circling around the room. And it's a dance that begins a feast or, I don't know, a court celebration. There's more medieval dances that are considerably rowdier when everyone is already drunk, even in court dance territory, sort of. But Pavane is not one of these. Pavane is one where everyone still behaves. And Fauré's piece sounds just like that. It's very mellow, it's very slow-moving, a little poised, and a little boring. And I think what they did here, what Jethro Tull did, they gave it a little more personality, because they couldn't help that. It's what they do. Ian will perform classical piece with more syncopation than it was intended to have, because it's the way he plays. And they inserted a development into it that wasn't there in the original at all. While the original does have a slightly darker part in the middle, it's of course completely different from what they have in this track.
Yeah, if I remember right, this was a pretty frequent live song around this time for them. So I don't know if you've seen the 2003 Montreux live DVD.
I have.
But I think this was on there. Could be wrong.
I don't really recall, but again, it's not a track you will recall.
Yeah.
It's not particularly memorable. But yeah, the late Tull flute solo makes an appearance here, and I do enjoy that part.
Yeah, and I don't know, synth strings on this one too. Just not very appetizing.
Yeah, well, I don't really like sampled instruments in general, be it strings or be it brass, like on Jack Frost on this album. They never sound natural enough to merit more than a passing use, more than just a little bit of color. When you lean into the sampled sounds a lot, it has to me a bit of uncanny valley.
Yeah. Synth strings have never found sounded good in any era, I think. It's always the one instrument that you just shouldn't try to do on
the ones that sound really synthesized, that don't really pretend to be real strings, and that just have the string timbre, but it's clear that it's a keyboard instrument, I'm fine with. Like the old string synthesizers, like German-made. I don't remember the names, but there have been a few. I don't mind these, and of course the mellotron strings as well, because it's clear that it's a recorded sound played on a keyboard. It's not trying to pretend to be the real thing. While 90s and early 2000s, there have been a lot of attempts to sample live instruments and make them sound like the real thing, and bring them as close as possible, which is I don't think it's ever a good idea. I don't think it's possible. It's still even with the advancement of the virtual instruments and technologies, they still have an uncanny valley feel to me.
Yeah.
Track 10, First Snow on Brooklyn.
Now it's the first snow on Brooklyn, and my cold feet are drumming. You don't see me in the shadows from your cozy.
I don't think it will feel that familiar to you. Like you said, from the beginning of Pavane, it sounded like, and further on. The first lines of First Snow on Brooklyn, of the song itself, sound to me a lot like another Harry's Bar.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
From Roots to Branches.
That's
Very
actually
similar.
a later Tull song I'm actually familiar with, so I can understand.
Yeah, so you know what I mean. And there's live strings on this one, unlike the other ones. But I feel that the live strings on this song just give them an extra radio sheen, because they are not very, maybe, I don't know, not particularly inventive, they don't bring something new to the track, something unexpected. They bring something that sounds like Let It Snow. kind of standard Christmas music vibe to them.
I'm curious where the New York focus came from on this one.
Well, I'm sure, as with a lot of Ian's lyrics, partly personal experience, partly fantasy. I'm sure he would have arrived to New York through JFK and gone in a taxi and all of that.
Musically, this is another one. It's just for me.
Yeah.
You know, I dislike the hot rods on the drums. I generally don't think that's a great choice unless for specific circumstances, so that makes it kind of boring for me. Also, some not great lyrics, I think, on this one. The whole thing about I could murder coffee in a grande cup right now is kind of made me laugh.
Yeah, I feel like all the best new original songs that Ian wrote at the time, he put on Rupee's Dance.
I did think the strings were kind of nice, though.
Really? I don't know how I feel about them. Kind of this song has a kind of sweet sound to it, not in the good meaning of the word sweet, and the string just kind of add to it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say schmaltzy, but they're certainly veering in that direction.
Track 11, Greensleeved. So this is another traditional one, I believe. The acoustic guitar here is nice. It sounds, I don't know if it's a Spanish guitar, I could be wrong, but it kind of has like a particular sound to it.
No, it's a steel string.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yes, Spanish guitars have nylon strings on them, and they have a less bright sound, generally.
The thing this track reminds me of is actually just, so playing in jazz band in high school, and we would always have to do a Christmas concert every year, and I kind of feel like the pieces that we played were not that far off stuff like this, kind of slightly jazzy versions of traditional Christmas songs. It's what it makes me think of.
Yeah, however, this is an interesting point about this song. It has a very jazz approach, but it's not jazz. It's 7/4. The original theme is practically unrecognizable. You can hear it's Greensleeves, but it has a completely different flow to it, a completely different feel. And they're trading solos, they're trading their takes on the melody, but this is specifically isn't jazz. If you compare it to how they did God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, they're not pretending to be a jazz band. They're a rock band doing a melody the jazz way. So it's like jazz approach, but prog folk. And that's what makes it really interesting to me. I think I started noticing that because as I was listening to this album, at first, like I said, I was a little bit annoyed, probably because it was, listening to Christmas music ahead of time. So what I did was I discussed that with my wife a lot. We listened to some of the tracks together and kind of bounced thoughts off of each other. And that was her idea, that they were doing it like a jazz tune, but it's not jazz. And she would know because she studied jazz in college.
It's actually another song that kind of, it feels like, again, like there's sort of a 60s style, what they were going for in places.
Probably yes, but again, I'm not sure a lot of people would play Greensleeves in 7/4 in the 60s. It's a unique thing that only Tull would do.
Yeah, just in terms of the sonic choices and that kind of thing.
Track 12, Fire at Midnight.
I believe in fires at midnight when the dogs have all been fed. A golden toddy on the mantle, a broken gun.
I don't think they did this song justice.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the updated version with the straightforward drums turns it into Christmas rock, and that's the part of the new version that I really dislike. The straight rhythm that comes in compared to the original, where it's much less predictable.
Yeah, this is one that was quite a bit worse than the original, I think, when you kind of compare and contrast. It feels very laggard in the rhythm, is kind of how I would describe it. It feels like it's kind of struggling to keep up somehow.
Interesting, even though the rhythm is simpler.
Yeah, it just does. It's not carrying itself the same way. It just sounds sluggish to me.
It's slightly saved by the new coda, the new ending.
Yeah, the home with you repeating.
Yeah, I think that sounds very nice. It's a new idea they added to this song, and it works. I could imagine it sounding very nice in a live performance with an ending like that. But yeah, overall, the straight 4 on the floor, or whatever, maybe not 4, 2 on the floor, drum rhythm in the verse is just unnecessary.
Yeah.
I don't know why Dawn felt that it was a good idea.
Yeah, just as an aside, so the way that Dawn approached a lot of different parts was kind of interesting, which, some things he chose to play exactly as it was, some things he chose to simplify, some things he kind of put his own twist on. And I'm talking about like just in general, not just on this song. So I guess it was just up to him kind of how he decided to approach different things. For me, I think it would feel kind of criminal for Barry Barlow parts not to try to go for the whole thing, but that's just me.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I will say on this song that, like I said earlier, I think the theme of this song fits the idea of Christmas very well, which is, the peace of the hearth fire, in the middle of the holiday or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Thematically, it's probably one of the best songs from the Tull catalog to be put on a Christmas album. And it's a shame that they kind of turned it into a more straightforward Christmas rock tune.
Track 13, We Five Kings. So a couple of things on this one. Firstly, the kind of Latin intro, to me it kind of sounds like it's trying to reference living in the past, which I guess is kind of cute.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it tries to do.
Yeah, with the little woodblock percussion sound. It's amazing how hearing this transported my mind to school Christmas concerts. Because I don't know about you, but We Three Kings is a classic religious Christmas song.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, and so this immediately made me think of all those times I had to sit through this song, waiting to go home for winter break or whatever.
Yeah, the 5/4 thing is clever because We Three Kings isn't 3/4, and it does make sense makes more sense to call it We Five Kings and play it in 5/4, and. Unlike Greensleeves, which is turned into a completely different piece of music, this one is very close to the original Three Kings melody.
Yeah.
And it's just the slight change in rhythm doesn't turn it into a different theme. And that's what I'm talking about when saying that they take a different approach every time. This is very recognizable as being We Three Kings, but it's slightly proggier, in some way. And I would full welcome this song playing on the radio or in a supermarket around Christmas.
Yeah, I don't know.
Alas, it won't be there. I like this one. I don't have much to say about it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
It's another one that, to me, a lot of these traditional instrumentals, they just kind of get into easy listening territory for me. And
that's true.
I'm not knocking it. By all means, that's what Christmas albums are for, is to be easy listening, to me, what it makes me think of is to me, Christmas albums are the kind of thing that you put on in a little CD boombox in the living room when you have your family reunion over Christmas.
Yeah.
And then nobody actually ends up listening to it because they're all in the dining room eating or whatever. It's just kind of playing to nobody in the empty living room. That's what Christmas albums are to me. And that's the kind of thing that this song makes me think of. That's exactly the kind of background music it would be.
Yeah, but among the stack of CDs that you would have at Christmas, this would be the best one. The one I wouldn't mind at all.
I would put on the green vinyl of the How the Grinch Stole Christmas soundtrack, which I actually own in America.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm too familiar with that one.
You never watched The Grinch?
I don't think I have, no.
Oh my God, man. You got to look it up on YouTube. That's like the quintessential classic Christmas thing. I would watch that even today.
Like the one with Jim Carrey?
No. The old 60s one. Forget all the new stuff.
Okay.
It has fantastic. Is it Vincent Price who did the music for that? I think it is. Who did the deep voice?
Shows what I know.
Yeah, you gotta watch that though. That's like cultural classic for all time.
Okay. Track 14, Ring Out Solstice Bells.
Now is the solstice of the year, when there is the clan song that you hear.
Again, a song that makes sense to put on the Christmas album, to give a radio update, because I think hardly anything changed in the arrangement compared to the version from Songs from the Wood, apart from the fact that in terms of mixing, it would be more palatable to a modern listener.
Yeah.
And I really, really don't have much to say about this one. I don't think they made it worse, really. Because probably for one of the reasons would be that I think this one they actually played live a number of times. Am I mistaken?
I don't know. I feel like they weren't playing it at this time, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, not at that time, but it feels like, well, I may be out of my depth, but the way they are playing this song here, it feels like a song that's more familiar to everyone involved in the recording. Or maybe they just made a big effort to just recreate it and just modernize the mixing and the overall sound.
The main thing that sticks out to me on this one is this is the one track on the album where the vocals are really not good, I think. He's really going for stuff that's kind of out of his range, I think. Yeah,
they should have transposed it down like they did with Jack Frost.
I seem to recall, so you mentioned the String Quartet's album, which my dad got that when it came out. I never really listened to it, but I heard bits and pieces of it. And I remember this song was on there, and I remember it sounding very not good on that one with the vocals.
Yeah, but that's even later.
Right. So one random thing on this one, I noticed, I was listening to this on streaming, and on streaming services, this song is actually misspelled. It's Ring Hour Solstice Bells, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Do you think they don't really care about this album too much to never fix this?
Probably. I think I actually saw on Spotify, I don't use Spotify, but I looked it up to check, and the title of this album was just Christmas Album.
Yeah,
it wasn't even the Jethro Tull.
I'm just looking at this right now. Yes, and Ring Hour Solstice Bells.
But I don't know. I think the vocals aren't good on this. I think the mixing is not great. The bells at the end don't sound very powerful. In the original song, that's like a very standout moment of the track, and it doesn't really feel that way this way.
Sure, the original track is miles better. I'm just saying that there isn't any specific choice here that makes it outright worse, other than it just being a different, slightly weaker performance.
I didn't actually listen. Did you catch if they did anything with the reverse hand claps on this version?
No, I don't think I took note of that. I think it's just straight hand claps.
Okay.
Yeah, straight. This is because I think they didn't really do any studio trickery on this one. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of stuff that they wanted to experiment with. So, like on Jack Frost, like here with the hand claps, they just took the toolkit they had at the time, which was a fine toolkit. They were and still are incredible musicians, and they put that toolkit to use without trying to break any new ground. Because it's a Christmas album, because you're not expecting new ground on a Christmas album. It's not what a Christmas album is about. That the Christmas album is about familiarity and comfort. So that's, I think, the idea behind not doing anything special with the hand claps.
Yeah.
And other things.
Track 15, Bourée. So this is another one, I don't really get the Christmas feeling here, but I guess they just put it because it was like a classic Tull easy listening piece, is kind of the way I would think. So this one is actually kind of notable, I guess. It kind of serves a useful purpose in like the Tull discography writ large, just because this is basically just a recording of how they played it live circa like a modern Tull. So it starts with the new kind of live ending, which you mentioned way back on the stand-up episode.
Yeah, it starts with a quote from the original version, not jazzed up, just straight, which I don't really enjoy that much, but I kind of understand why they feel it's a good idea to put it in, just to reference the original piece. And Yeah, I feel they think it has a fitting mood as a Christmassy track. And one of the things I sort of like about it on this particular album is the silly grunts that Ian is doing during the solo.
Yeah.
All these silly noises on a Christmas album. Just imagine it being played in the living room or the dining room during the family gathering, and Ian just going.
Right.
It's pretty hilarious, and it makes it a better thing.
The accordion's cool. And this one, I think it kind of stands out a bit.
Yeah. Again, the grunts take me back to Terry Pratchett again, to Hogfather, who is in the book an anthropomorphic pig. The Santa in that world is an anthropomorphic pig, like a not a pig, a boar, a wild boar. So yeah, this is a Hogswatch song now. I declare it to be.
It's definitely the least Christmas thing on the album, in terms of like thematically at least.
Yeah, well, does it really have a theme?
No.
It has a mood, and it's a light-hearted mood, which sort of fits the overall sound.
The only last thing I have on it is just at the very end. There's so this is James Duncan on drums, and he plays a Zill bell, which is a bell that Zildjian sells. I mean, it may not even be Zildjian. I mean, I don't know what cymbal brand he uses, but I had a Zill bell growing up that I bought when I was obsessed with Primus. It inspired me to buy a Zill bell because of all the little bells and splashes that someone like Tim Alexander used. So I bought one of those. It's this very it doesn't look like a bell, but it's kind of like it maybe kind of looks like a china in a way, but it's like a small little bell sound when you hit it, and it's incredibly loud when you play it. It rings forever and ever. So it was actually kind of too loud for me when I got it. I barely ever used it because it was so loud. But I just heard that, and it immediately made me smile to think of someone putting in a Zill bell. I used to, when my band first started in high school, whenever we'd do an album, back then I had quite a big set, and so I would always try to, I didn't want to have all these cymbals and weird percussion of things and then not use them. So a lot of the time I would go out of my way to like play the Zill bell just one time, one note on one song on the album. So then I could say I actually used all of my stuff on the album.
Yeah, but that's the thing about the weird instruments and weird percussion, maybe weird guitar pedals as well. You don't want to use them on every track, because then it just gets tiring.
Right.
Like weird effects, like I don't know, like the talk box.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean on the guitar, you don't want that everywhere.
Right.
You just want a track that uses the talk box.
Yeah.
I think with the Zill bell you're spot on, because I just opened up the Jethro Tull website, the page about James Duncan, and it says that James plays Zildjian cymbals.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. Because I knew that Doane Perry plays Paiste, so I wasn't sure about James Duncan, but that's good. Because I knew it sounded familiar, so I think I had the right thing.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Track 16, A Winter Snowscape. This is what is, I believe, an original Martin Barre composition.
Yeah.
That first appeared on his solo album a few years before that, right?
Oh, that I didn't know.
I think it's a great track.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing in the whole album.
I really enjoy it. This may be preemptive because we're supposed to, keep the reveal until the end, but I may agree with you. So, one of the things it reminds me of a little bit is, of all musicians, Aldi Meola, who also recorded a sort of Christmas winter album called, I think, Winter Nights, with a Ukrainian musician playing the traditional Ukrainian folk instrument, the bandura. And some of the guitar work in A Winter Snowscape kind of makes me think of Aldi Meola, the way he builds his melodies. But it's certainly not saying that it's unoriginal or derivative. I think it's 100% Martin.
Yeah, it's really characterized by like the descending, falling guitar. which I really love the way that sounds. It's very apprehensive in kind of a cool way.
Yeah. So Winter Snowscape appears on Stage Left, Martin Barre's album from 2003.
Okay. I wonder which it was written for.
I think when I was looking things up for this episode, I think it was written for his solo album.
Mm-hmm.
And it appeared on the Christmas album as sort of courtesy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really wonderful. I think the flute brings out extra things in this melody.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the little triangle. I'm not sure if it's a live triangle or a sampled, because there's at the end of the track, when it finishes, you can hear there's also electronic percussion.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds awesome.
In the background. Yeah, it sounds great. So I'm not sure. It could be that the triangle is also electronic or sampled, or what do you think? Do you think it's a triangle played live?
I didn't even notice the triangle, to be honest, when I listened to it.
It comes in the middle. Yeah, it just goes. You can't really imitate a triangle with your voice.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You can do a hi-hat, but
yeah, when I read the title of this song just before I listened to it, I was expecting it to be more of like an actual soundscape type track, but so I was kind of surprised to see it was more of a acoustic guitar centric one. But I think it's great. It actually it has me wanting to check out Martin's solo stuff more, because to be honest, I'm not really familiar at all with Martin's solo stuff. So
I'm familiar with some and unfamiliar with others, and I must say I hadn't listened to Stage Left, so I think we both should do that.
Yeah,
immediately.
This is another one. Some of the songs we've been talking about lately on other albums, where this one has an ending, but it still fades out. Kind of strange.
Yeah, but at the same time, as it fades out, it kind of strips back some layers.
Yeah.
And you can hear the electronic percussion and other little things, which is, I think it's nice.
Yeah, this was a top one for me. So as I said, I was kind of expecting this to just be easy listening rehashes through the whole album. And I think I think there is a lot of that on the album, honestly, but there were parts of it that were more interesting than I was expecting. So mostly kind of the very beginning and the very end, but still, I'm probably never going to listen to this album again. But there were still parts of it that kind of surprised me.
Even during Christmas, you won't put it on.
No, I'm not a Christmas person. I don't do that. I just do Halloween.
Well, if your Japanese friends, subject you to a Christmas celebration, you might get back at them. By playing Jethro Tull. No, I think, what it represents is a band trying to do a Christmas album in the way that no one else can. So it's a uniquely Jethro Tull thing. It's, as I think, the name of it, it's very simple. It's one would say primitive, but if you think about it, it's exactly what it is. It's uniquely what it is. If you think about the name, it means this is a Christmas album that only Jethro Tull could make. Like a few new songs, a few old songs, a few completely unique spins on Christmas carols and traditional Christmas music, all put together, all sounding very cohesive, done by incredibly professional and talented musicians. And yeah, it's not really inventive. It doesn't break new ground, because a Christmas album should not be breaking new ground. Christmas music is comfort food, and this is sort of gourmet comfort food, if such a thing exists, I think.
Yeah, to each his own.
It's like, I remember that our colleagues, the Momes, like their gastronomical metaphors.
Yeah.
So this is like mac and cheese with blue cheese.
I know there's plenty of people in the world who, they're thrilled about Christmas, and as soon as it turns December or after Thanksgiving, they immediately turn on all the Spotify playlists. I can't even imagine the billions of dollars of revenue that those playlists generate every year.
Yeah.
But if you like Tull and you're into Christmas stuff, then by all means, just I don't really get the point of the re-recorded Tull songs and that kind of thing. Maybe it's just because I'm a hardcore Tull fan, but to me it's just like, just play the originals,
Yeah, because there is music that I associate with with New Year and Christmas. And one of the things I discovered recently, I think last year or the year before, was one of the best bands and albums that really fits the sort of New Year mood for me was a few early albums by Yes, like Fragile or even Close to the Edge. Because Yes is a very uplifting band, a very major key sort of music. And it fits what I expect Christmas music to be, interesting Christmas music to be, a little bit more than the Jethro Tull Christmas album.
Mm. Do you have favorite tracks and bottom tracks you could pick out?
Yeah, I think my favorite track would definitely be A Winter Snowscape.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a wonderful piece of music. I'm not sure I have another really favorite track on this one. And bottom track, I would say Last Man at the Party, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the same as you. Winter Snowscape is the standout by far. And I made myself pick two others that I thought were the most interesting, and that was Birthday Card at Christmas and Holly Herald.
Uh-huh.
And for bottom, I didn't pick any specific tracks as bottom, because I mean there's nothing on here that's like offensive to me. But I just kind of said like most of the re-recorded Tull songs and the easy listening traditional songs. Not because I think they're bad for the most part, but just because they just don't offer anything to me. They're just kind of boring.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Oh, so Eugene, how are you going to be spending Christmas this year?
Well, like I said, it's New Year rather than Christmas, I think. I don't know, same way as always. Have friends around, play some music, hang out together. Actually, one of the things we do on the New Year's Eve, well, not the New Year's Eve, because New Year's Eve is everyone's running around in preparation. But sort of, it's not even the night of the New Year, but several nights afterwards, because everyone's on a vacation. Everyone's up very late, so we have friends around and we play mahjong. It's kind of our personal tradition, like the proper Chinese mahjong, not the solitaire computer game version.
Yeah,
because it's a game that takes a lot of time. It's not something you can whip out for an evening and be done. It takes ages to play, and we're not super fast players like some Chinese people I saw on YouTube are. So yeah, we do it over hours and hours, and it's a complete game of mahjong takes several evenings to complete. Wow.
Yeah, I know mahjong and shogi are very big in Japan. They always air like national tournaments and stuff. I'm going to be flying back to the U.S. To see parents over Christmas. So, I mean, for me, Christmas now is kind of the time where I'm able to go back home and just kind of chill out for a while and not have to worry about a lot of stuff. It's a little sad because Christmas for us used to be a much bigger affair, just in the sense that back when my grandparents were alive, kind of family would fly in and stuff, and it would be a much bigger thing. But now it's really just me and my two parents. It's kind of sad, kind of what it's become.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how we're living now. So
yeah, at least you can get back.
Yeah.
Is it going to be difficult to get back into Japan?
Oh, it's a whole ordeal. And it's, so I mean, this is a long story, but I went back to the US in March, and the only, I figured by the time I come back in December, like, this process will be so much smoother. But the truth of the matter is the only thing that's different is that my quarantine is 4 days shorter when I come back to Japan, but everything else still applies despite vaccination and all that kind of thing. So you have to get tested in Japan before you leave. Then you have to get tested in America before you go back. You have to get tested again as soon as you land. You have to quarantine for 14 days or 10 days. You have to get a third test in Japan on your 10th day. It's the whole thing is ridiculous, but it's all the stuff you got to go through now. You got to wear a mask for 13 hours on the plane, which gets so claustrophobic. So I hope this stuff is all over soon.
Yeah, well, we can but hope. And on that hopeful note, we wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, even though it's still a few days before Christmas when this episode goes out, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think we'll be 10 days before, but let us know how you're spending Christmas. Are you going to play this album for Christmas? Let us know if this is the thing you play. Let me know if I was too harsh on this album. And we'll be back to our regular schedule with Rock Island in 2 weeks.
Yeah, see you. Cheers.
Thanks.